Warlord Skarsnik, known by his official title as King of the Eight Peaks or simply just the King under the Mountain, is the chieftain of the Crooked Moon tribe and the most powerful night goblin warlord in the whole of the southern world's Edge Mountains. All the other orc and goblin warlords acknowledge his overlordship of the mountains around the ruined dwarf hold of Karak Eight Peaks, for none could ever overcome Skarsnik's incredible cunning and ruthlessness. Since his rise to power, Skarsnik has since been singled out from all the other goblin warlords before him for possessing an incredible intellect that is wholly unexpected from such a primitive race. Skarsnik is an expert ambush strategist who is able to plan out strategic battlefield plans and guide and command the ferocity of the greenskin hordes to feats of organization that has never been accomplished by any greenskin in recent history since the time of the infamous orcish warlord Azhag the Slaughterer. Perhaps one of his greatest exploits was during the year 2498, where the Crooked Moon tribe, under the command of Skarsnik, ambushed a dwarf army crossing the treacherous valley known as Mad Dog Pass, which later became known as the Battle of the Jaws, named after the greenskin formations that enclosed upon the surrounded dwarfs. In the following Battle of East Gate, Skarsnik was able to also wipe out about half of the dwarf troops, but the other half managed to get into the citadel hold of Karak Eight Peaks. Since the dwarfs returned to occupy their ancient hold, Skarsnik has virtually kept the dwarfs prisoner within their tiny citadel. When the dwarfs try to enter or leave the stronghold, he hunts them down and hangs their beard scalps on long poles within sight of the citadel walls. He is remarkably cunning and is constantly luring the dwarfs into ambush after ambush. Under Skarsnik's leadership, the Crooked Moon tribe became the most important tribe within Karak Eight Peaks. As they increased in power, so too did the fighting with nearby dwarf and greenskin armies alike. Along with his immense intellect and powerful magical staff, Skarsnik is accompanied by a great cave squig named Gobbler. Gobbler is an enormous, very smelly and mindlessly vicious creature that Skarsnik had saved from death when it was a mere squigling. Ever since then, Gobbler had become an eternally loyal companion to Skarsnik, for although his other goblin chieftains and warlords' loyalty can be put into question, Gobbler had since saved Skarsnik's life many times before. As a sign of their close companionship, Skarsnik feeds Gobbler regularly with the tasty flesh of dwarf, skaven, and any goblins careless enough to stray too close to its murderous maw. The life and story of Skarsnik. The life and story of Skarsnik can all be traced by the recorded accounts of a once famous playwright by the name of Jeremiah von Bickenstadt, a son of a minor family that had dreams of making himself famous and wealthy through the writing of plays. However, his father originally wanted him to be a famous professor at the University of Altdorf, but Bickenstadt refused to follow the path his father laid out for him. This choice had since changed Bickenstadt's life forever, for after refusing his wishes and breaking his father's once kind heart, Bickenstadt went about his life as a freelance playwright, where he would eventually journey to the hostile lands of the Border Princes. From there, Bickenstadt and the merchant caravan he was with had been attacked by a large war band of night goblins during their stay at a local fortified inn. Bickenstadt was later captured and sent to the domains of the greenskin-infested stronghold of Karak Eight Peaks. There, Skarsnik, the warlord of the Eight Peaks, had both offered and threatened Bickenstadt to write down the story of his life. Without any real choice on the matter, Bickenstadt was forced to obey and began writing down Skarsnik's life on paper. The Enslavement of Skarsnik. On the accounts given by Bickenstadt, Skarsnik was born like any other greenskin born into existence. The goblin that would later be known as Skarsnik started out life by clawing his way out of the dirt and into the darkness of a glowing mushroom-lit cave, along with the birthing of his brethren. In time, these small goblins began to venture into the domains of the Backstairs Boys, a small tribe that is a faction of the larger Crooked Moon tribe. Even upon his birth, Skarsnik showed an aptitude of intelligence by being able to spurt out his first words moments after birth and being able to command his brethren through the dangers of the caves. As these small goblins ventured into the central camp of the Backstairs Boys, the small goblins were forcibly integrated into the tribe. Forced into slavery, these goblins were given the task of harvesting the many mushrooms that infest the lairs of the backstairs boys. Skarsnik during this time was known simply as Runt, for unlike his other brethren, Skarsnik was significantly smaller than the rest of the other goblins. Even as years have passed, Skarsnik was still a lowly runt in the tribe's slave pens, while his former brethren have since grown up and left him. His small stature, however, did not stop him from rising through the ranks of his tribe. After a few years of personally leading the newer spawnings by himself, Skarsnik was finally elevated to the position as a true member of the tribe, and was renamed as Runtgit, for he still was fairly small. Due to Skarsnik's uncommon intellect and cunning, Runt boss Grobskab gave Skarsnik the task of slave master, or runt boy, to his own warband of little goblins. Using his now prestigious position, Skarsnik had been able to curry favour from the tribal leaders, Big Boss Tarkit Fingfinger and Master Shaman Dufskull. Skarsnik had also been able to gain a powerful ally amongst the Scarvans that infest the mountain by helping to reinstate Skreekrit Yellowtooth, a former captive of the Backstairs boys, as Fang leader of Clan Moors. In return, secretive trade between the Scarvans and Skarsnik had made his tribe, and more specifically Skarsnik, incredibly wealthy. However, Skarsnik's personal nemesis, Runtboy Snotrook, had revealed Skarsnik's secretive dealings, which angered Big Boss Tarkit and forced him to order for Skarsnik's execution. However, thanks to the timely arrival of a dwarf expeditionary force attacking the camp of the Backstairs boys, Skarsnik had been thrown into an underground river and taken to the outskirts of Carrick 8 Peaks. It is from there that he became a slave to a marauding warband of goblin wolf riders. The Rise of Skarsnik. After months of trailing, Skarsnik led the wolf goblin tribe into the foothills of the World's Edge Mountains, where he set his sights upon the ancient dwarf kingdom of Carrick 8 Peaks. With his now sizable army, Skarsnik subjugated all the green-skinned tribes that stood in his way, as well the orc tribes that occupied the lands around the east gates. Since the kingdom's downfall, the titanic gates of Carrick 8 Peaks had always been open to all, but when Skarsnik came upon the gates himself, he found it closed. Skarsnik was both confused and scared to find the door closed, for its closing simply means that Carrick 8 Peaks had recently changed hands since his departure some time ago. After questioning his new orc subordinates, Skarsnik quickly realized that the Scarvans had recently conquered the upper reaches of Carrick 8 Peaks in a lightning-fast invasion. He ordered the army to encamp themselves during the night, while Skarsnik would sneak in and talk to the big boss of the Crooked Moon tribe. Entering a ventilation shaft that Skarsnik had discovered when he was a mere runt, Skarsnik snuck back into the domains of his former tribe, the Backstairs boys. It was from there that he discovered that his old rival Snotrook had become the new big boss of the entire tribe. Still having lingering resentment for Skarsnik, Big Boss Snotrook threw his rival into a massive fighting pit, where Skarsnik had to fight off packs of ravenous cave squigs all by himself. It was just then that the largest cave squig Skarsnik had ever seen came after him, but the creature stopped just short from him and curiously sniffed him. Out of the purest luck, Skarsnik had met the same cave squig he'd saved from the cruelty of Snotrook many years ago. After gaining the loyalty of his new companion and the timely arrival of Krugler and his wolf goblins, Skarsnik allowed the squig, now named Gobbler, to devour his former rival and took back control over the Backstair boys. After taking control of the tribe, Skarsnik took his army deep within the mountain, where he began to realize the full scale of the situation. The greenskin tribes were in disarray, the Scarvans having launched a massive invasion that literally split the tribes of the Crooked Moon in half, with the other half being cut off to the east by the emerging Scarvan armies. Skarsnik's original plan was to gather around all the remaining tribes that he could as secretly as possible. Without the chieftain of the Crooked Moons, who was isolated to the east to provide proper leadership, many of the shamans and sub-chiefs quickly bowed in submission to Skarsnik's command. Skarsnik made use of cunning traps and ambushes to halt the Skarvans from pressing deeper into his territory, whilst also making sure that they didn't know that he was gathering his new army for a sudden counterattack. After plotting long and hard, he was finally ready to set his plan into motion. The first step of Skarsnik's scheme was to enact a series of bluffs, betrayals, staged retreats and cunning counterattacks to confuse the Skarvan leadership of his true intentions. The greatest difficulty was making sure his new subordinate big bosses, shamans and chieftains knew how to properly follow his brilliant battle plan. After some explaining and a lot of bashing, his subordinates finally got the picture, and they all cackled madly for the inevitable slaughter that was to unfold. The Naming of Skarsnik. Before the battle began, Skarsnik tricked his former acquaintance, Skreekrit Yellowtooth, who was now High Chieftain of Clan Moors, into an ambush that saw the total destruction of the Skarvan military leadership. With his death, Skarsnik led his troops to the Hall of 1,000 Pillars, where the final battle over the dominion of 8 peaks would be decided. At the centre of this titanic chamber lied a Skarvan fort, located around a throne that the king of Karak 8 Peaks once ruled. Behind a thin wall of rock within the walls of the chamber, Skarsnik ordered for the attack to begin. A horn sounded across the chambers, then another and another, until all the ruins of Karak 8 Peaks rang to their long, mournful songs. Squigpipes and drums joined their call, the dwarf city reverberating to greenskin war music. Explosions rocked the city as openings were made within the walls of the chamber using stolen dwarf black powder kegs. The Skaven army's line of retreat were cut off as their tunnels were also sealed by explosions. As greenskin warbands surged through the gaps made within the walls, Skaven infantry regiments began to rush to the other side of the chamber. Meanwhile, Skarsnik and his own personal warbands appeared from the other side, opening another gap within the chamber walls. As the greenskins attacked from opposite flanks, another Skarvan army appeared from the northeast. Through one of the great arches, a column of Skarvan were marching down the slope. They came from the second of the Ratmen's main camps, ready to reinforce their brethren within the Hall of 1,000 Pillars. Panic rippled through Runtgit's warriors, but his bosses and chiefs slapped heads and pointed to Runtgit and Gobler. They fought on harder, their faith in Runtgit urging them to supreme effort. As the battle raged, teams of goblins were able to infiltrate the gatehouse that guarded the east gate, and upon opening the gate, Boss Krugler and his wolf goblin riders entered the fray and attacked the flanks of the Skarvan relief force. Surrounded on all fronts from the rampaging hordes of greenskin warriors, the Skavens were defeated. Knots of them fought grimly on, knowing there would be no quarter, but inevitably all the Skavens within the chamber were dead. The camps to the northeast were razed to the ground as Krugler and his wolf boys killed the stragglers. In the ensuing aftermath, goblins began to slowly whisper amongst themselves. Whispers went around the goblins, they turned into shouts and then songs. Goblins did little dances, kicking pointy-toed shoes high. For miles around, the caves echoed to goblin cheers and the roars of cave beasts. For the first time in many years, the goblin tribes had retaken Karak 8 Peaks. Skarsnik, still known during that time as Runtgit, was propelled high up in the air from his brethren as they chanted his name to the heavens. It was at this time that Shaman Dufskull finally gave him his true and destined name, Skarsnik. As Skarsnik took his new name all over Karak 8 Peaks, the Skarvans were butchered mercilessly. Goblins in Skarvan skins approached checkpoints, knifing surprised guards. New breeding chambers were doused in squig oil and set ablaze. Several towers collapsed simultaneously as goblins pulled pit props from shafts, undermining them. Everywhere, hordes of laughing goblins descended on the newly conquered Skaven territories, hacking furred bodies to pieces in vicious tunnel fights. In every corner of the upper city, the Skarvans were ambushed and destroyed. Skarsnik's genius had been to assault the Skarvan outposts simultaneously. Isolated, unable to reinforce each other or bring their numbers to bear, the Skarvan armies panicked and were cut down by the hundreds.